Welcome to the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network, where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville here on the Fandom Podcast Network. My name is Kevin. I'm going to be your captain, and I'm very excited because this week we're going to be discussing Next Generation Unification Part 1 and 2. Got the Blu-ray right there. Check it out. We are discussing Star Trek two-parters. We'll get into more on that in a moment. But first, need to get the rest of my crew here. So first, I'd like to welcome with me my brother from another mother and also the co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, our captain, co-captain, and security weapons officer and special intelligence officer, maybe, Kyle Wagner. How are you, sir?
Kevin, you didn't program my hair quite right for this podcast.
It's a little off, sorry. I took some notes from Data.
We'll see how good my phaser aim is this show.
With us also is our first officer and counselor and the founder of the BQN, Miss Amy Nelson. What's going on? Oh, she's on that mute again.
Jolon True.
Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good.
I think what happened was Amy just forgot to put her ears on for this episode.
Yes. I needed to get, they were just getting on my nerves.
Crusher didn't quite get the right setting on those ears. So, yeah, there you go. Okay, guys. So here we are. We are episode 192, Star Trek The Next Generation Unification Part 1 and 2. And we're going to be reviewing every two-part episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. And we got a lot ahead of us here. This, of course, is the Fandom Podcast Network. BQN, Amy, you're getting busy over there at BQN as usual, right?
Yeah, having fun. Got Trexperts quiz going strong and all good things, infinite diversity, and the view screen coming up at Labor Day. So.
Wait. Is there a rumor you're making a Klingon feast over at the BQN too?
Well, we will be getting the food replicator up and going for its run. So there is food going on at BQN as well.
Nice. Well, I'm excited here, guys, because this is episode 192, Union Federation. And, of course, we are talking Star Trek The Next Generation. If you're listening to this audio podcast, make sure you check us out on YouTube because we got a bunch of fun slides to go with this. And we are going to review every two-part episode in the 7-year run or 7-season run of Star Trek The Next Generation. And we've recently done, of course, the first episode was Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2. We did Redemption Part 1 and 2. And, of course, this week we have Unification Part 1 and 2, followed by Time's Arrow, Chain of Command, Birthright, Descent, and Gambit, all two-part episodes. And then what we're gonna do is have a final episode where we're going to rank them all, discuss them a little bit more, kind of get our feelings overall on all of them, and discuss some of the other non-TNG two-part episodes that we also enjoyed. So welcome to the Union Federation. We're excited about that. Now, as I mentioned, our mission statement here is with these 9-part episode, this 9-part podcast with 8 of them, of course, talking about the two-parters. But wanted to let people know, too, as of this recording here in 2024, it's been 30 years since since Star Trek Next Generation TV episodes left us for the last time. And well, we feel that revisiting these two-part episodes is a fun way to celebrate our TNG fandom and share the nostalgia as we've long missed since experiencing it for the first time. And we got a little bit of that, of course, with Star Trek Picard. And so that was fun to go back on there. But as a reminder, guys, I have a little picture up here of all the two-parters that we're going to be hitting here. And they went from 90 to 93. And some of these were season like cliffhangers that you'd have to wait till next season, and some of them were mid-season two-parters as well. So we'll get into that. But let's go ahead and get into the next or the way mission here, guys. First and foremost, guys, we've got the Admiral's Log. What we're going to do is we're going to have a synopsis here of part 1 of Unification. And then we're going to have a little brief discussion about that and then go into part 2. And Amy, why don't you go ahead and get us started here and remind us, was this a season cliffhanger or was this a mid-season 2-parter?
Well, this was a mid-season because Unification Part 1 aired on November 2nd. And then the following week, November 9th of 1991, we got Unification 2. So we didn't have to wait, but just 6 little days. All righty. So in Unification Part 1, Picard and Data follow Spock into a Romulan space on a dangerous mission. Now that's just the one-liner. Now here it really is. Starfleet Admiral Brackett informs Captain Picard that Ambassador Spock is missing and an intelligence scan has placed him on Romulus, raising fears that he may have defected. Picard orders the Enterprise to Vulcan to speak to Spock's ailing father, Sarek, with whom Picard shares a close bond due to their mind meld in a previous episode. Sarek mentions Pardek, a Romulan senator with whom Spock has been maintaining a dialogue for several decades. Lieutenant Commander Data discovers a visual record of Pardek from a trade conference and confirms that he is the figure seen on the intelligence scan of Spock on Romulus. The Enterprise crew find the remains of a decommissioned Vulcan ship, the Tapa, in the debris of a Ferengi ship which crashed in the Hanalan asteroid belt. Picard calls in a favor from Chancellor Gowron, speaking to one of his aides and convincing him to lend them a Klingon ship that could take them to Romulus while cloaked. Picard and Data board the ship, with Picard ordering Riker to investigate the Tapa and try and find a link to the Romulans. En route, the Klingons inform Picard that they intercepted a message of interest to him. Sarek has died. On Romulus, Picard and Data, disguised as Romulans, locate the spot where the picture of Pardek and Spock was taken, which Data determines is an Intelligent Bureau building. They wait until Pardek arrives, but when they approach him, they find themselves met by soldiers and taken to a cavern. Pardek arrives, explaining that Romulan security knew they were on planet and they've been brought underground for their safety. Picard states that he is looking for Ambassador Spock, who emerges from a nearby tunnel.
There we go. Dun, dun, dun. I feel like it was just yesterday when I watched this for the first time. It was such a big deal. We'll get into a lot more of that later. But I want to get your original and new reactions to part 1. Amy, I remember you were mentioning it. You were watching it, like you started watching it the other day about the same time I did. And we were laughing about the funny scene in the ship, the Klingon ship, where Data's just kind of like staring at Picard while he's trying to sleep. But I wanted you to feel free. I didn't want to steal your thunder there, but feel free to give me your original and recent reactions to part 1 here.
Oh my gosh. This is definitely well into everyone's clicking. The chemistry between the actors is so great. Their comedic timing is perfect. As when Picard's trying to sleep on the Klingon ship and Data's just standing there, and Picard can't sleep because he knows Data's, well, don't watch me. So then he turns 90 degrees, but Brent Spiner's head follows him. So his body's turning, but his head is turning. Oh my gosh. It was so hilarious. I'm like, that little bit right there, just comedic perfection. I loved it. But wow, there was so much going on. There's no way that Spock is going to deflect to Romulus. That was just ridiculous. But, we got to find him. So that's a really big thing. And then to see Sarek again, we could have a whole episode on Sarek and, watching him in that state. That was very, Whew, that was a tough one. So yeah, let me turn it over to you guys. I've been talking a lot.
Kyle, your original reactions to Unification Part 1 and your new reaction.
I remember back when this first came out, everyone was making the big deal of Leonard Nimoy returning to Trek, and I mean, it was all over. I think Entertainment Tonight had a segment on it before it happened. It was a huge deal. The weird thing is being so excited for it when it originally happened, and then kind of being a little bummed that we don't see Spock until like the very end of the episode was kind of a little frustrating. What in my rewatch though was it's been a while since I watched it. I didn't remember some of the comedy aspects of it. And one of the things that, at least with the part 1 compared to the other 2-parters we've had, this episode didn't feel like it had quite the weight that when you go back and like watch Best of Both Worlds and Redemption, that for those first episodes and those had a ton of weight to them. And this one, it did, but it didn't. It had its comedic moments. It had its like, we were just building and building for the Spock moment. And yes, everything was Sarek. That's incredibly powerful. But it's such a different approach than what we were used to from the first 2-parters that we had. And I find it interesting now just to see how much comedy they played up on this within this 2-parter, yet still trying to find the seriousness of it. And it's one of those times where Trek just kind of was trying to balance the episodes out. It felt a lot more than what they had been doing. And so it's just interesting to go back to see it that way. And it's seeing it through a different light than from when I originally saw the episode. And it looked like too that they were having a lot of fun with this episode. It was probably Patrick Stewart was definitely having some fun. And also, I just got to bring up the uniform, seeing the gray shirt with the jacket again. Hadn't seen that in a while.
Yeah, the captain's jacket was introduced in season 5. I know because I got one of those hanging over there. I just thought it was a cool look for him. And yeah, I love the thing that I remember liking about the first episode originally, and it was nice to revisit it this time, was you have this kind of new relationship with the Klingons and how, the Klingons owe Captain Picard a little favor, and so he needs a cloak ship, and he asks for help. And the whole scene is as Amy mentioned, being on board, and how Captain Kavada was like, we're a military ship, you're gonna have to sleep on these hard metal beds or whatever it is. And but the thing that I thought was kind of funny is that this Klim Daka Jim guy who is in charge of this whole kind of like fleet graveyard or whatever it was, and just how he's just kind of like unimpressed by the Enterprise, and then like they bring him on board, and then Deanna's talking to him, going, and I thought this was kind of funny since he's like I bet they think that that if you're gonna help me, I might be more persuaded.
Yes, your feminine wiles.
Yeah, and he's like, they're probably right, and then he like goes right into the so, creepy dude, but excellent uniform he's got on there. So yeah, but yeah, I just remember too, like originally when this was on, I'm like, okay, this is when we get Spock, right? Where's Spock? And all we get in the very beginning is like that grainy video footage, or video still, and then we get his grand appearance at the end, which is pretty cool to end the episode here. He comes out of the shadows. So yeah. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into part 2. Lead us off, Amy.
Well, Spock demands that Picard leave Romulus. Picard informs him that the Federation's concern over his cowboy diplomacy and tells him that Sarek has died. Spock takes the news of his father's death stoically. He explains to Picard that during the peace negotiations with the Klingons decades earlier, he felt responsible for putting Captain Kirk and his crew at risk, and so is now working alone on a personal mission of peace to reunify the Vulcan and Romulan people. He's working with an underground movement to achieve that aim. Pardek has asked Spock to come to Romulus to meet with the new proconsul of the Romulan Senate. a young idealist who has promised reforms. Picard expresses concern that the willingness of the Romulans may be in part of a larger ploy. Spock agrees, but points out that if a larger plot is at work, it is best that they play out their roles within it to uncover it. On the Klingon ship, Spock and Data work together to break a Romulan code and complement one another. Spock remarks that Data has achieved the ideal Vulcan state of pure logic without emotion, and Data remarks that Spock feels emotion, which Data is trying to achieve. Picard, Data, and Spock are soon captured by Commander Sela, Tasha Yar's daughter, who is planning a Romulan conquest of Vulcan. Of course she is. The stolen Vulcan ship and 2 others are carrying a 2,000-strong Romulan invasion force under the guise of escorting on a peace envoy. Spock refuses to deceive his people by announcing the false news, even after Sela threatens to kill him, and she locks the 3 in her office and leaves to order the ships on their way. By the time she returns, Data has hacked into the Romulan computer system and created a holographic simulation that distracts her long enough for the 3 captives to incapacitate her and her officers. Meanwhile, the Enterprise arrives at Galorndon Core, discovering the 3 Vulcan ships, and moves to block their approach to Vulcan. A medical distress signal comes in, a distraction created by Sela. But as Riker orders the ship towards the source, they receive a broadcast from Romulus in which Spock reveals the true nature of the Vulcan ships. A Romulan warbird decloaks, destroys the ships, and recloaks, killing the troops inside instead of allowing them to be captured. On Romulus, Data and Picard bid farewell to Spock. The ambassador is intent upon his goal, realizing that it cannot be achieved through diplomacy or politics, but that the Vulcan philosophy is beginning to spread among the young of Romulus. Picard offers Spock a chance to touch what Sarek shared with him, and the 2 mind meld.
That's the way it ends. Woof.
Mm.
All right. Kyle, let's start with you. Your original and new reactions to Part 2, Unification.
So excited to actually get a whole episode with Spock. That was of course the big thing. Maybe the slimiest Romulan ever in this episode too, with that young senator.
Yeah.
Just how he kept his face and everything like that. It was I just remember that standing out, and not the kind of oddball scene with Riker and the club with the lounge singer. I think I was like Jonathan Frakes saying, no, I just need an episode I can do some music. I need a music moment here.
Melota.
Yeah.
Definitely much better than episode 1 as far as the 2-parters go. It's definitely more of my favorite of these 2. I will say this: Romulan security has got to be some of the worst security of all time. If the 3 of them can escape in the middle of the Romulan headquarters, just a hologram, and then just sneak out. I mean, I know
budgetary concerns.
Exactly. But no, but what made this episode great was the little moments. The moment when Picard says he's in good company, when Spock says, "You remind me of a former stubborn captain of the Enterprise." That moment between him and Data, when they have that exchange where Data's like, "What you're trying to get rid of is what I'm trying to achieve."
Mm-hmm.
I think that was incredibly powerful. And then that to end it with Spock sharing the mind meld with Picard to get to his father's feelings and get it in his own way a chance to make peace with his father. And I thought that those were the moments in this episode that really stood out and makes this episode stand out as part of this 2-parter.
Amy, what about you? Your original reactions to seeing this for the first time and your new ones for Part 2.
Yeah, I'm sure I saw it when I can't really remember much. Yeah, but this time around, it's funny you say that you enjoyed this one, because I enjoy the first one actually better. This one, I kept being pulled out of it. When Riker went down to and was getting the information from the Ferengi, right? And yeah, Malota and da da da. Okay, look right there. If you're watching on YouTube, that screenshot of Riker grabbing him and threatening him just because he's smaller and more intimidating. Like, no, Starfleet does not operate that way. And I was like, he's just being a bully, and he's being just as bad as all the other aliens that we complain about are being bullies.
I saw that differently. He was basically pulling his weight around in his power, and he wanted to remind this Ferengi that there's another power here. And
you're going to do that with physical force. That's my point. He doesn't need to do physical force. You're right. His position as Starfleet first officer, like, no, you're gonna, and you can throw Starfleet action, but he was being physical, and that it threw me out. I'm like, no, that is not Starfleet to me.
I think
personally,
when I saw this and thinking about what we knew about the Ferengi at the time, I think it was meant to be as like, this is the only way I'm going to get through to this Ferengi is by showing this dominance over him. Now, I think as time has gone on and we've gotten more of the development of the Ferengi, especially through DS9 and stuff like that, we look at it at a different light. But when you look at it in that moment, because we hadn't dealt with a ton of Ferengi up to that point, I think it was to show this is how you get through to this guy, because otherwise he's just going to smart mouth, and not give you what you want when you really are in a time constraint. Lives are depending on this information. So
I could see why that's off-putting, though. Yeah,
there's other ways to handle it, is what I'm saying. Another one, like when they reprogrammed in Sela's office, and she comes in. Okay, I'm sorry. Even if a hologram, when you walk into a room, wouldn't you? They had space to hide behind this, hologram wall. So when you walk in a room, you're not going to notice that the sides have gone in 2 feet. I'm just like, and especially in a small office, to me, that just, they came out from behind the hologram of the wall. So there just was some of these things that I don't know why they just took me right out of the episode. And I'm like, oh, this isn't. But with that aside, it is pretty amazing to see Leonard Nimoy, on TNG, like he's ours. This is canon. He's bridging that gap. Absolutely. And that idea of reunification, because we know that, Vulcans and Romulans had a common ancestor. So like that idea is pure Star Trek. And for that, I mean, and it's so great that we get Unification Part 3, right? In Strange New Worlds or Discovery. Sorry, my bad.
That's coming up soon. Good points there. It's interesting when I remember first seeing this live, and it felt like a big deal. And it was this, and watching this again, it brought back those feelings having Spock on there, because before Spock, we had McCoy make a brief appearance in the first episode. And then later on, of course, we get Scotty. And so it was nice to have someone this big be part of and kind of, bringing the two time periods of famous crew members together. And I like the idea of, Sela coming back, because we just recently seen her in the Klingon episodes Redemption, and her working secretly with some of the treacherous Klingons there, and that she's still got her fingers in this kind of Romulan web and power. And I like that she was a natural character to come back, and Denise Crosby coming back. I could just tell Denise was just enjoying playing this character. Plus, we got a couple of other slimy Romulans as well. And, and I like the idea that she says in this episode that, yes, your plan of unification is going to happen. It's just going to happen a little bit differently, It's going to happen, but with the Romulans taking over Vulcan. Kyle.
And the thing about Celia though, in this episode, is I kind of almost feel like they weakened the character in an aspect, because Like
Really?
Amy said, she falls for this hologram. She's
Okay, hold on, guys. Hold on, guys. Getting nitpicky about some of these little things and not paying attention to the overall story is where I'm going to stop you guys. Okay. I mean, if you really want to get nitpicky, you can get nitpicky about the production value of certain things. But when it comes to like falling for stuff, you got to look at the overall picture here. I get it. I can look back at any of these Star Trek episodes and nitpick little things here and there. But this is about the main point. We got Spock, we got unification going on, and we got a good bad guy here. Yes, you know, she maybe didn't notice the dimensions of her room and didn't pay attention to it, and they were able to do that. I get that. But is it really, does that still take you out of it from enjoying the overall episode?
Well, no, what I was going to finish my point was that then they kind of make her a butt end of a little bit of a joke with the whole nerve pinch thing. Well, I couldn't have done it better myself. It made me feel like they kind of weakened the character at least a little bit in this episode from what we've seen of her before to this point.
Interesting.
And so I just that was kind of my one thing with that there. I mean, I'm trying not to be nitpicky about it. It was just something that stood out to me within the rewatch of it that maybe I didn't know. And I also want to know where Spock got the weapons from V.
Amy, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Still with Sela, the one scene that again made me chuckle, just seriously, when she's, writing Spock's speech. Oh, I'm doing some writing. I don't get to do that very often with my job. And then Data's like, well, maybe you should get a different job. Come on. It was so funny. I'm just
that was funny.
It was. And actually, I like Sela here better than in last week's episode. What did we cover? Redemption. Yeah. I felt like her goal to take over Vulcan, it seemed better plotted, more strategic, more possible,
especially with the invasion force hiding under
Trojan horse. I mean, that works every time. We know it, so I liked her, actually, Sela, better in this one than in that one. But
when I was watching the second part again, I was reminded that this is the Romulans were becoming the big bad. And I think Redemption really kind of kicked that off. We had like these encounters with them previously, and there's this the scary neutral zone. And I like the fact this is where the Romulans were like, nah, Klingons aren't the bad guys anymore. At least not now. But the Romulans were the ones, because I felt like the Romulans were, if not on the same playing field as the Federation, and that they had ways to almost like, maybe upend the Federation at any moment that they could try. And I like that Sela is still up there in one of the biggest baddies in TNG, and that she is the one that's kind of behind the scenes and stuff like that. And we learn a little bit more about that going forward. But I always liked that this kind of was like, the Romulans, we can't mess with them. We got to be careful with them. Did you guys get that feeling too?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, guys, let's hit in our next segment here. So these 2-part episodes were inspired by an article I found by Dalton Norman back in 2022 on Screen Rant, where he ranked every 2-part episode. And I figured, well, you know what? Let's dive into a little bit deeper here on this. But he does go into the episode and give a little thought, his own thoughts on this. Unification Part 1 and 2. In one of the best episodes about the Vulcans' unification reuniting Trek fans with their favorite pointy-eared hero, Ambassador Spock has gone deep into the Romulan territory, and Enterprise has to track him down in order to ascertain why he seemingly defected from the Federation. Once on Romulus, Picard learns of Spock's ambitious plan to bring peace between the Romulans and their distant Vulcan cousins. giving fans their first up-close look at Romulan society, including that wonderful matte painting of Romulus, which I've always liked looking at. Unification was an absolute treat for longtime Trek viewers. The usual secretive race was laid bare in the episodes, and the tense negotiations have lofty implications for the future of the Federation. Despite all that, the biggest selling point of the two-part story is return of Leonard Nimoy as Spock. The veteran actor played the character with an interesting grace that is indicative of 80 years of aging since the original series. One of the things that I just wanted to mention before we get into how big this episode was, guys, was, if we're going to get nitpicky here, I want to talk about that conversation that Picard has where he challenges Spock on the way he's approaching this. And this is where Data and Picard are in their makeup, basically, their Romulan disguises. And how he's kind of calling him out, and the cowboy diplomacy thing comes up. Did you guys think that Spock went about this the appropriate way, or do you think that there's a definitely good reason why the Federation was sent after him, Amy?
Well, when Spock explains why he is doing this, he's got the logic, but he is too focused on this and not looking at the bigger picture of his role as ambassador to Starfleet and the Federation. So his logic is good, but you got to look at the big picture, especially, with someone at his role. So I get that. And I love that Picard pushes back where it's like, yeah, you're right, but you have to answer to Starfleet. That's how it is. And that, and Spock sees the logic. So I thought that was very well handled, where no one's really wrong. Everyone's logic is sound.
What are your thoughts on that, Kyle? The whole cowboy diplomacy thing. It seems like Kirk's rubbed off on him a little bit.
A little bit, but Spock is always also, and we've seen it now with especially seeing a younger Spock in Strange New Worlds. Spock is sometimes, I'm right, logic dictates this is what I'm doing. But because he's, especially in this aspect, we're at a Spock who's really trying to get rid of his human side or really bury it. He's not seeing the bigger picture of how the Federation would see this. I mean, they're seeing it as this invaluable ambassador, a Starfleet legend, and somebody who knows intricacies of everything that happens in Starfleet. And he's on your biggest enemy's home world with no security, nobody knowing exactly what the hell is going on with him. So, yeah, Picard was in every right to ask those questions of Spock as well. I think in this case, there's two rights here. There's not necessarily a wrong. It's just good intentions, but not thinking them through completely. And again, I always say that the hardest thing to do in life is balance what's in your head and what's in your heart. And I think that's with the whole idea of a Vulcan, is that it's all about your head, not about your heart. Here we see where Spock, it's all about his head, but his heart is still influencing him, whether he realizes it or not. And it's so, you can't have one without the other. It's unless you are a machine in the aspect of you're a programmed computer with no emotions. It's impossible. And it's just, it's what makes the episode so interesting, because I think it goes back to that moment between Spock and Data, which makes it even that much more powerful, is the conflict you see within Spock. But they do it in such a way it's not tormenting him. It's just it's almost like it's an annoyance to him. And then towards the end, when he realizes they've all been kind of played here, you see him his human side comes out more, and you see more of the Spock that we saw in TOS than we had in the original films than we had. And it's the magic of Nimoy, and what a phenomenal actor, knowing Spock like he does, to be able to pull off that transition mid-episode and see that progression. And I think it's one of the magics of having Spock and Leonard Nimoy in this episode.
So Unification This two-part episode, which features Leonard Nimoy Spock, the first of 2 episodes, earned a 15.4 household Nielsen ratings. Remember Nielsen rating, guys?
Yeah.
They were
We're
everything.
technically still around.
I kind of miss hearing Nielsen ratings with the days of streaming now. But it drew over 25 million viewers, making it one of the most watched episodes in all 7 seasons of Star Trek Next Generation run. I remember hearing how big this was. This was a big deal. This is when Star Trek TNG was on all cylinders, and it was just one of the biggest syndicated shows. It was such a big deal. Do you guys remember the excitement around this and how much publicity this brought, Amy?
Yeah, and you know, especially just sort of on the cusp of losing Gene Roddenberry, where it's, you know, we are getting the TOS, you know, Leonard Nimoy coming in with a big hug to all the fans. It was a big deal, and it was everywhere. And it's funny because, you know, we got McCoy on the first episode.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like it's handed off until here, you know, unfortunately. This feels like, all right, by now, all the TOS fans who were diehard and hated TNG, why this isn't Captain Kirk. Now, at this point, everyone is loving TNG, even the original haters.
Yeah. Kyle, your thoughts on the impact of these episodes and how many people were watching this?
It's funny because when the second episode started with the dedication to Gene Roddenberry, I had actually forgotten the timing of it all because it had been so long since I had watched these episodes, but it brought back those memories. And again, I go back to what I was saying earlier. This was huge. People were talking about this for months because they heard about it. It wasn't like they were trying to keep it a trade secret. They were advertising the hell. Leonard Nimoy is back. And it was huge because you could have had all the original series stars on. But considering who was still alive at the time and the wait, there was only 2 that could really truly be the handoff. And it was either Nimoy or Shatner. To get Nimoy on and have Spock show the respect to Picard like he did, but still have a little conflict with him, but still have that there was huge. And it cemented the aspect of, okay, Spock is part of this world. And it really was a bridge for a lot of the original series fans that they maybe hadn't gotten yet. Yes, we had DeForest Kelly. Yes, we had Scotty, but this was Spock. And that's a whole nother level. And to have Spock and Picard on the same screen that's a legendary moment in Star Trek history.
Good point. Yeah, it is. And you know, you hit something on there about how this putting Captain Picard up against Spock like this and working together, but you know, having a little friction was a big deal. And I kind of felt too, it was just another stepping stone of Star Trek TNG just kind of rising up saying, we're here to stay. We are the next generation for a reason, and yet we are still going to show respect to what came before us and have these 2 iconic characters now work together. And I think Spock was a great character to put in this, and we'll get a little bit more into that a little bit later. But you kind of teased this a little bit earlier, Amy, and I'm glad you brought this up because I've got some other related topics here regarding this episode. So this episode had been praised for the novelty and nostalgia of seeing Spock and noted for introducing the peace-loving Romulan faction. Story elements and appearances by Spock are included in Unification III in Star Trek Discovery Season 3. I remember this here because, just for you guys that remember, or if you guys have not seen this episode, Star Trek Discovery Season 3, says, while grappling with the fallout of her recent actions and what her future might hold, Burnham agrees to represent the Federation in an intense debate about the release of publicly sensitive but highly valuable burn data. And if I remember correctly, Kyle, I think this is one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek Discovery because of the drama that was behind that.
Yes,
and,
it was.
Yeah. And Burnham was kind of like in an inquisition, if I remember correctly. Her own mother was there, and she really had to kind of make her case, and it was just really, really well written. But we get this scene here of Spock, and they're looking at this picture here, and I have it up here on YouTube here if you want to see it, and it actually falls under a goof under the IMDb section of Unification III, Star Trek Discovery. The footage that Burnham watches of Leonard Nimoy as an older Spock is taken from Unification Part 2, 1991. It's from a private conversation between Spock and Jean-Luc Picard in a cave in Romulus. There was no one recording that conversation that we know of. But I thought that was kind of interesting, though. But I do remember this. I was reminded of this episode. I had kind of forgotten about it, but it was kind of that we have this Discovery tie-in that they actually called the episode Unification Part 3, Amy. I know you remember this.
Yeah, that was so wonderful. And again, that just the bringing it together and then to see it happen in the future. Like, what could be more Star Trek? The ideals and the hope for a better future is right there in Discovery and clouded amongst all the darkness. That's why we missed it.
Yeah. Kyle, you remember this episode of Discovery?
Oh yeah, this was one of my favorite episodes of Discovery too, and I think it was, in my opinion, one of the best episodes, period, of Star Trek Discovery. I know for a lot of people who weren't necessarily huge Discovery fans are feeling it. This was an episode, just the title alone brought them in because of the curiosity factor of it. And then, like I said, to turn out how to be one of the better episodes of Discovery, I think this was an episode that brought a lot of people in to Discovery who maybe didn't jump on it right away. And again, this is using what you have in history and what you have with what you're dealing with Star Trek to build upon and build that world and continue that thread. And it's one of the things that does make Star Trek so strong. And I think it's actually one of the things that a lot of the newer Star Trek shows have been better at, especially of late, is bringing that connective tissue forward into what's currently happening in Star Trek, whether it's the craziness in Lower Decks with all the Easter eggs, what they did with season 3 of Picard, moments like Unification 3 and Discovery. It's just it's the right move, and it's doing it in a way that I think all Trek fans feel respected by, because they're getting their Trek is getting recognized.
Yeah. One last thing I wanted to mention before we move to the next segment here is these episodes were aired in the weeks before the release of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Spock makes reference to the events in the movie when he asks Picard if he is aware of Spock's role in the first peace overtures to the Klingons. Picard is aware of the public history of Spock's role, but not the whole story. Spock says that he forced Captain Picard to accept the mission and that he felt responsible for what happened to Kirk and his crew. This time, Spock only wants to risk his own life, which is why he came to Romulus on his own. So that makes sense, his motives of that. Amy?
Whoa, wait a minute. Now, of course, we knew that because we TNG fans, of course, had watched TOS, especially Undiscovered Country. But first run.
Yeah.
So that is totally setting up the movie. So the fact that Picard's acting like, oh yeah, that's acting old news, but that has yet to be introduced into canon.
When this was originally aired, we had not seen the movie yet.
That's
we knew
right.
The movie was coming out. But yeah, when he makes reference to that, it doesn't quite hit home until after we rewatch these and have seen the film.
Yes. That line totally is the setup for Undiscovered Country. Wow.
We're going to come back to Undiscovered Country in a little bit, but I did want to mention that there was a novelization of this episode. You guys remember this here? Star Trek The Next Generation. It says, at last, generations meet on the book Unification, a novel by Jerry Taylor based on the 2-part television episode story by Rick Berman and Michael Piller. Part 1 teleplay by Jerry Taylor and Part 2 teleplay by Michael Piller. And then it's also, Unification was one of 5 Next Generation episodes novelized, the others being Encounter at Farpoint, Descent, Relics, and All Good Things. Amy, do you remember this?
No, but I remember talking about it on many, many podcasts. So yeah, that's sort of a good trivia question that I have heard. So
Yeah.
not every episode was made into a novel, so only those. And I've heard and have heard Jerry Taylor say, like, in interviews, like, she loves this book. And everyone who's read it loves it. And it's on my to find and then to read.
Do you remember seeing this, Kyle?
You know what? That's actually the first time I've actually seen this. I did not honestly know about this novelization of this, but it doesn't surprise me. Again, it's one of those episodes that fits perfectly for a novelization. And it's funny because I think about it now. It's like, yeah, of course this exists. I mean, this is one of those things where, anything big at the time within science fiction, they would give you a novelization where they would put in a little bit of expanding the story out and giving you a little bit more than what was just in the episode or in the movie. So
yeah. I had forgotten about this. I know I've seen this book in places. I've seen it used in used bookshops or thrift stores or whatever. I love the cover. I think it's really cool. Well, also, guess what? This 2-part episode also was released on a Blu-ray, which I have right here as well. And I also picked up the Australian version. Not much difference to let you guys know, but there is some special features on here. And first of all, there's a deleted scene, a cut scene in the original episode where Captain Picard welcomes Sarek's wife aboard from the transporter room. In the original aired version of it, I think the scene takes place in his ready room or something like that. We also get Mark Cushman, the writer for Sarek. He's interviewed about the Unification documentary as well. And also they do talk about the Gene Roddenberry dedication at the top. There were some other highlights as well. They proudly unveiled the new CG model of the Enterprise in Unification, with the mother of all hull scraper shots to be put through its paces. The CG model effortlessly merges the sleek shape of the original 6-foot Enterprise physical model with just the right amount of relief on the hull to give it a hint of the 4-foot model's bumpy surface. And now Leonard Nimoy did not join them for the audio commentary, but I did listen to most of the commentary here, and they have Jerry Taylor on there, which is really good. She goes deep into this, and Denise and Michael Okuda are on that audio commentary with her, and they do ask her some questions, and they kind of go over the episode. They ask each other. It's a really good listen. I highly recommend it. The reviewer says here, while CBS's decision to make the audio commentary and documentary exclusive to this disc is understandable, the same logic shouldn't have been extended to the deleted scene. When fans are shelling out for the full 5th season set, it's a bit much to exclude a deleted scene on the basis of creating 2-tiered market. Those who can and are able to pick up the single disc release, and those who aren't, but are nevertheless paying for the full 6-disc set here. And they did give Unification high marks on everything, including the commentary. And I did want to mention, too, that when you watch these Blu-rays that were released for several of these 2-parters, there's a lot of promo stuff in the beginning. And, of course, Season 5, they were talking about here. I have the full Blu-ray set on here. Just looks beautiful as you're watching it as well. But I do recommend getting the Blu-rays as well if you don't, just because they're a nice collector piece, and also has stuff that the season collections do not have. So
right.
There you go. Okay, guys, this is the Union Federation. Let's get into the next segment, which is trivia. All right. Kyle, would you like to lead us off with part 1 of trivia, and then followed by Amy? We'll go back and forth here.
Okay. So, although not the first episode to air in the wake of Gene Roddenberry's death, the game 1991 had that distinction. It memorialized him with a title card, Gene Roddenberry, 1921 to 1991. The title card would appear at the start of both parts of the episode. Real interesting. I streamed this off of Paramount Plus. The title card only appeared on part 2 on Paramount Plus.
Not in the beginning of part 1, huh?
Yeah, it was.
Was it? I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw, and that's why I was like, oh my gosh. And then it hit me again. I was like, okay, I got it. Yeah. Well, due to Leonard Nimoy's schedule, Unification 2 was filmed before Part 1.
This episode establishes that Spock has become an ambassador. He would continue to be referred to as Ambassador Spock after this point, including in the film Star Trek 2009. Spock's father, Sarek, was also an ambassador both on TOS and TNG. Hence, after disappointing his father by joining Starfleet, he has ultimately followed in his footsteps. Kyle?
The unification title has a double meaning. In the in-universe story, it refers to the attempted unification of the long-separated Vulcan and Romulan cultures. In a meta sense, however, the title also refers to the long-awaited appearance of one of the original series crew as a significant player in the Next Generation era. DeForest Kelley, Dr. McCoy, had previously appeared in the pilot Encounter at Farpoint as a visiting admiral, clearly as McCoy, considering his southern accent and his reference to Vulcans. James Doohan, of course, Scotty, would appear later in the season 6 episode Relics, which aired in 1992.
All right.
Well, Mark Leonard's final appearance is Sarek. This episode marks the death of Ambassador Sarek. It's the first time a major Star Trek character dies permanently. A few others had died, but been resurrected in the same installment or an immediate follow-up, i.e. Search for Spock.
Leonard Nimoy had not previously appeared on the show because he had set his asking price for as much as appearance as much as $1 million, which by far beyond the budget of the series. However, since this episode was in some ways a teaser for the upcoming Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which came out in 91, on which Nimoy was an executive producer and entitled to a percentage of the profits of that film, Nimoy agreed to appear in this two-part story for standard SAG pay. Since this episode was broadcast in November 1991, a month before the release of Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, it could be considered promotion for the motion picture, which I think it probably was.
Right. And I also want to tag on another bit of trivia. Part of the agreement to be on TNG's reunification was that his son, Adam Nimoy, would be allowed to direct not one, but 2 episodes, which he did in season 6.
There you go.
So this episode actually foreshadows both of Spock's subsequent appearances. He makes reference to his actions in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, which was a month from release. In the present story, he is working on behalf of the Romulans to reconcile them with the Vulcans. He's continuing his advocacy for the Romulans, leads him into conflict with, hello, Christopher, I'm Nero, leading into the events of Star Trek 2009.
I like that connective tissue. That was good. So we're going to get into part 2 trivia here, guys. And I wanted to bring up a couple of things here. So the episode aired, as we mentioned, a month before Star Trek VI, which makes reference to the actions of both Spock and Sarek in this film. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and watch this movie, Star Trek VI, because the reason why I want to, first of all, it's my favorite film of the original TOS series. I love Star Trek VI: Undiscovered Country for a lot of reasons. Yours too, Amy?
Yep.
So I watched the Blu-ray version of it. I think I still have it over here somewhere. I'll worry about it later. But I was watching one of the newer releases of the Blu-ray, and I realized that there were some scenes that weren't in there. More specifically, here it is, a picture here. I have a picture of the Blu-ray and the original double disc of the movie. And remember when they released the double disc versions of all of these original films, they had a lot of special features on them. But that Blu-ray copy does not have what we kind of jokingly call the Scooby-Doo ending, guys. And I put a post on Facebook saying I was watching the newest Blu-ray. I had forgotten that it didn't include the Scooby-Doo ending with the mask reveal. The Klingon assassin was revealed to be Colonel West, played by Rene Auberjonois, played Odo from Deep Space Nine, which included another scene with Michael Dorn's character to be cut. I had to get my original DVD copy to go and watch that ending. And apparently, and I went online and I did kind of a deep dive, guys. Apparently the original version in the theater, they had cut this scene out. And which is weird because when the Klingon assassin falls after Scotty shoots him, you visibly see human blood near him. And then it just kind of cuts to the female Klingon chancellor who had taken over for Gorkin, saying, "What's going on here?" But when you watch this, you remember that on video and later on, they would always show this scene. They would show, hey, there's a mask here, and they would pull it off. And then you would see this scene with Michael Dorn's character, who I think plays like the great-grandfather.
Grandfather.
And they pull the mask off, and there's another Federation officer going, wait a minute, this isn't Klingon blood, and they make that reveal. But a lot of people seem to remember this scene more and think it was in the original film. So do you remember seeing this for the first time with this scene, or do you remember where they don't show it, Kyle?
I seem to remember I've seen it both ways, and maybe it's because I watched special features.
Because there is a director's cut which has this scene in it, and then there's the theatrical cut which does not have it apparently.
Yeah, I remember seeing this later on, and it probably was the director's cut on this because I didn't remember. I was like, I don't remember that scene from the original film, but it's one of those interesting things where it's like, does it play better? This one of those times where the director's cut, does it play better this way, or does it play better the original way? And I think that's very intriguing. You guys are both waiting. I love this film too. It's one of my favorite TOS films, and I think it's one of those ones that was underrated for a while and has really become much more appreciated as time has gone by.
Yeah. Amy, do you remember the Scooby-Doo ending, as we call it? Because you're taking the mask off the villain that died. Do you remember this, or do you remember?
No. But I have a thing. I don't remember anything unless it's TNG. It's a weird thing.
Well, I've made a decision, Kyle. I'm going to buy the recent 4K edition because it includes both versions of this film. Plus, you get digital.
There you go.
No.
I'm going to hit up the next trivia thing here because I thought this was interesting. I love bloopers. And this one here is from the second episode here. It says, as Data, Spock, and Picard head to the underground tunnels to make their escape, a film crewman's reflection can be seen in the green crystal on the table. Boom operator Bill Gauk can be seen in the reflection in the glass pyramid on Nero's desk at the end of the episode. This is the first accidental appearance of a production staff member in The Next Generation. Apparently, there was 2 other ones. But here's the interesting thing, guys. It's not in the Blu-ray, and it's not in the recent releases. You got to go back to this bad boy right here, DVDs,
gosh,
and pull this out and be able to see the original version of that one. Because in the commentary or in the special features of this, Denise and Michael Okuda talk about this reflection of this crewman, and that for the new Blu-ray release, they got rid of it. And I'm showing the 2 screenshots there. Yeah. And these screenshots are actually from my camera, putting it up to the TV to bring this to the table here. So
that is awesome, Kevin.
But you see the guy's face in that picture right there?
Clear as day. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I had to share that with you because this one of the things is, and this is another point, guys. If you have the physical media copies of the newer ones, don't get rid of the old ones because there's stuff you can't find in some of the newer releases, and that is one of them. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, too funny.
Amy, why don't you go ahead and read the next trivia for part 2, Unification?
All righty. Well, this episode contains the first instance of Klingon opera in the series, as well as Worf's obviously avid appreciation for it. And of course, it was mentioned later on in Deep Space Nine.
Kyle?
Malachi Thorne, Senator Pardek, was also with Leonard Nimoy doing his first Star Trek pilot, The Cage, in 1966, as the voice of Telosian Keeper. Thorne also played Commodore Jose Mendez in The Menagerie Part 1 and The Menagerie Part 2. The Trek threads are running thick in this episode.
I wonder if they remembered each other.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
The 4-handed pianist, Amory, is played by Harriet C. Leader. Her dialogue and singing were re-recorded in post-production by Judy M. Duran, who later went on to perform the voice of the station computer on Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
What? This is
Yeah.
the best trivia. I've not.
I know, right? Learning something here.
Yes. Well, this episode was nominated for Emmy Award for Outstanding Individual Achievement in Art Direction for a Series.
I think this piece of trivia is all for you, Amy Nelson. The revealing evening dress worn by one of Omag's female companions was reused as Troy's evening dress in 10 Forward in Man of the People.
I thought.
Okay, so
No,
I've got the
didn't, but that's
picture.
cool.
I've got the picture of those two female. I'm gonna just call them alien groupies for the Klingon guy here. I'm assuming it's the
Ferengi.
blue one on the right, because
Yes.
I don't remember her wearing the gold one on the left, which has severe underboob. I'm just gonna say
That looks like Tasha Yar in Naked Now.
a little
That
bit.
looks
Yes,
like,
it
because
does.
she had the underboob, but no, it was the blue, the dark blue with the peep shoulder. That's the one for Man of the People, and Troy looks amazing in it.
So that is the trivia action. Do you guys have any other comments on the trivia? Because there's some good stuff on there, Amy.
Yeah, no, that was some stuff that I did not know, especially the Senator Pardek was on TOS with Nimoy. I mean, that's just pretty darn cool. I love it that Trek reuses actors. I think it's just real smart and it's fun for us.
I love it when you see crew members accidentally make it into the film. Kyle, you remember on Mandalorian season 2, we saw that guy standing in the back while that action scene was happening.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wow, Star Wars has genes.
Yeah. All right, guys, this is Star Trek Next Generation Unification Part 1 and 2, Episode 192 of Union Federation. Let's go ahead and get into the next away mission. This is where I like to discuss the cast, guys. We've touched on a little bit here. We've gotten some great cast guest stars on here, other than, of course, Mr. Nimoy himself. Les Landau was director Part 1, and Cliff Bull was director Part 2. Of course, Jerry Taylor, Rick Berman, Brandon Braga, and Renee Echeverria were all writers on this. And for the guest stars of episode 1 of Unification, of course, we have Mr. Spock, Joanna Miles as Perrin, Stephen Root as Captain Kavada. For those of you that don't know who Stephen Root is, we'll get into him a little bit. Graham Jarvis as Klim Dokachin, Malachi Thorne as Senator Pardak, Norman Large as Neural, Daniel Roebuck as Jaren, Eric Avari as Vajik, the Klingon, one of the Klingons there, and so on and so forth. Of course, Mark Leonard is Sarek, as we got there. So I want to get you guys' thoughts on the cast in episode 1, guys.
Amy,
go ahead.
Oh, did you want to put up that last one so I can talk about him? Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, like I said at the top of the episode, Mark Leonard and his performance as Sarek, truly harrowing. I love Mark Leonard. His acting is just so grounded, and you felt that his brain was going mad. You felt it. Really good. And Sela, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And Sela, Denise Crosby, this is my favorite Sela. When I think of Sela, I think of her. And I think she just played so well. She fit right into the sandbox. Once we got over the, who the crap is Sela? We had to, now she's in it. We get her, we accept her. And Pardek, like that trivia was so cool that he was on Menagerie in the Cage. Like, that's awesome. Yeah.
One of the things I did when you brought up was the guest that they had on the Blu-ray special features here. Getting the guy's name, but he was the writer of the episode Sarek, and about how he was talking to Berman and the writers about what would happen to a Vulcan if they have issues with senility, and what it would lead to them eventually getting sick because of it. And so they discussed that a little bit in the special features, and I thought that was a good topic.
Yeah.
Kyle, what about you? The cast for episodes 1 and 2 here.
One thing Star Trek always nails is the cast. I mean, obviously, you talk about Spock coming in. You talk about Sarek, and I mean, it's it's one of those performances where if you're a lifelong Star Trek fan, it hurts to watch in a way. To see this beloved character in that state, and so well performed. It's just absolutely amazing. And
It's ironic too that he originally played a Romulan in TOS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and now he's like this famous Vulcan. And we're talking about an episode with Romulans and Vulcans trying to unite, you know.
Yeah, that's yeah.
And of course, Denise Crosby returning home to her family on Star Trek is always
so
important.
This picture that I have up here is obviously taken between scenes. What do you think Denise Crosby in costume is saying to Mr. Spock here, Leonard Nimoy in costume in between takes here? What do you think she's talking about?
Well, I just feel like seeing Denise Crosby, I feel like she's talking to him about like all the people that they know in Hollywood. She loves, and she has a history of her grandfather, and she's been in the biz. So I think they're talking, oh, do you know so and so? Oh, so and so and so and so, and they da 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 da.
No, I disagree. They are talking proper ear etiquette.
Proper ear etiquette. Well played, Kyle. I like that. That's good. Yes, you guys have touched a lot on the main characters here. I want to give a shout out, first of all. If you've been paying attention to the video, I've thrown up a couple of the Decipher Star Trek card games, because I used to work for the company, and Sela was one of the cards that you would definitely put in every Romulan deck here. But I want to give a shout out to Captain Kavada, the one that escorted the would-be new Romulans of Picard and Data, played by Stephen Root. Now, for those of you that don't remember who Stephen Root is, I'm just going to shout out a little bit of his IMDb here. He was recently on Barry. King of the Hill is one of the voices, of course. But most people may remember him from this. And I'm going to hold up an object and see if you guys juggle your brain here. This is a red swing line stapler. For those of you that don't know, he was the nerdy guy that they were trying to get out of the office, and he was very attached to his stapler. Kyle, you remember this, right?
But even more importantly, besides that too, not only can he dodge a wrench, he can dodge a ball.
Yes. Yeah, Stephen Root was also one of the co-stars of one of my favorite comedies of all time, Dodgeball. Great character actor. I think I remember him in what was it? The radio show, Kyle. What was that called?
Yes, News Radio.
Yeah.
News Radio.
Thank
yes,
you.
I think he was.
I know him from.
Yeah, I think he was the boss. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was great seeing him as a Klingon here and giving a little crap to Picard and Data, giving him a hard time.
I didn't know that's who that was. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that.
Yeah, one of his earlier roles too. So, but of course we got the iconic Spock back. It was just so good to see him on TNG, guys. It was great. So, all right, let's go ahead and head into our final topics here. Okay, so I want to wrap up here, guys. Final topics, whatever. I want to ask you guys and think about it now. Like, what kind of impact did this two-parter have? This is one of the questions we'll always ask on these two-part episodes of TNG, because they all had such impacts for one reason or another. A lot of them were so memorable for so many reasons, but also for the rest of the series and in fandom in general. And I'm going to start with you.
It's Leonard Nimoy. It's Leonard Nimoy returning to Trek. I mean, it's an absolutely huge deal. We talked about it earlier about him kind of being the one to finally kind of pass the torch from the original series to Next Generation. Then to have this two-parter be honored with the Unification Part 3 in Star Trek Discovery just tells you how revered this two-part episode is. And I think among the two-parters, it's still very unique in the aspect of dealing with such a serious tone and being in part of Star Trek history, but still having its funnier side to it, still having its lighter side to it. And I think that's what makes it unique among the two-parters, is that because usually the two-parters were either extremely serious or there might have been one or two that went a little sideways, but for the most part, they were just always so serious. And while this one played up the seriousness of it and gave you that sense of Trek history, they also had some fun. And you could tell it. Yes, even though really most of the cast outside of Riker having a moment here or there, it was about Data and Picard. And I really think that Patrick Stewart was doing everything in his power to make Brent Spiner crack up throughout the filming of this, because you just look at some of the facial expressions, the way he acts as Picard in this, is you see him act as Picard in ways I don't think you ever see him act as Picard again in the series. Like when he's making his little deal with the Klingons and everything like that. How he is with Data and on the Klingon vessel. It's a very interesting Picard that, like I said, I think is unique to this 2-part episode that we don't see.
Gotcha.
See again. So
Amy, what about you? The impact that this episode had, and on the rest of the series and fandom. And you're on mute.
Thank you. Looking at when you live long enough, as do we, you see this insurgence of Star Trek, and then it falls away, and then we get another run, and then it falls away. Like, this is the height. You've got TOS, the movie. You've got Spock on TNG. TNG is firing on all cylinders, and this is this pinnacle. We haven't even thought about another, but here we are, these two united, unification. Like, the title means so much, and it obviously has impact, and we see that and we feel that, and that idea of, again, bringing Romulan and Vulcans together just solidifies that world building for the Romulans, because we're going to their home planet. Like, there's so much importance to this 2-parter. Man, I'm getting all fired up, and I just absolutely love it. I'm really impressed with this 2-parter.
I'm with you there. Great points. One of the things too, and I think you jogged a memory for me, Kyle, I wanted to bring up, is one of the things that I really liked about this episode is that during this season and going forward, and we'll tease what the next 2-parter is, Data is really becoming one of the lead characters in this series. And also Data has a very special relationship with Picard. Picard likes to talk, Shakespeare with him. And I think this was one of the things where we really get a special moment. We start getting a lot more special moments with Data and Picard. And Data has some important parts in this 2-part episode too. Whether, he's helping with the carrier wave and the communication, or he's helping with the hologram, or doing the Vulcan nerve pinch, and just all these other moments. But also that moment while he is still in his Romulan getup, and he's having that discussion next to Spock, and going back and forth. That was one of my favorite moments in this whole 2-parter. And just, that he's trying, because if you think about it, Data is the Spock of TNG, and I love that moment between them. And there was some other good moments between other characters too. And I felt like a lot of the crew had a few of their moments as well. And it's just, like I said, this is one of the most important 2-part episodes, I think you could probably say, within the entire series. And in a way, maybe strategically done. I haven't heard where they're like, hey, let's reach out to do this 2-parter, because keep in mind, it's not a season cliffhanger. It is a mid-season of the new season, fall episode. But like, I'd like to know is, like, did they reach out to him going, hey, there's a new movie coming out. Let's see if we can ride this momentum, get more fans into watching this that maybe weren't giving us a shot before. And let's get one of the most iconic Star Trek characters of all time for a 2-parter. I'm just kind of wondering where that discussion started. And I don't remember that coming up in the was it the audio commentary track, but I would love to pick some brains there and find that out. But so guys, let's wrap this up here. This is, of course, episode 91 of Union Federation, talking Unification Part 1 and 2. Let's get your final thoughts on this. Amy, let's start with you.
Yeah, man, this is a really good episode. I've basically said it.
And by the way, real quick, so sorry to interrupt you, but I did want to mention, give me your final thoughts, but also I want you to rate the whole episodes back to back, because for those of you who are curious, we do this at this time of the episode. Part 1 got an 8.2 on IMDb. Part 1 got an 8.2. Part 2 got an 8.3. So they're neck and neck right there. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as far as my rating goes, it's so strong of a story. And the story is so Star Trek. So that story idea is going to put it above redemption for me. So I'm going to be in this 9 point. Okay, I want to say 9.1, but the things that I mentioned about the second episode that kept pulling me out and that weirdness. So I'm going to say 9.1.
All right. Out of 10. Gotcha. That's a good one right there. Yeah. Okay. Any other final thoughts on these on this episode?
No, I said it all before. Love it.
Kyle, give us your final thoughts on Unification 1 and 2 and your overall rating.
Obviously, one of the more historical two-parters in Star Trek history, having Nimoy on and the buzz that created at the time. And then, like I said, to be able to be such a strong storyline, they do a part 3 in another Star Trek series much later on, shows you the importance of this episode, this two-part episode. But for me, when I look at this, I can't put it above Best of Both Worlds or Redemption for a couple of reasons. And as great as it is, I think Best of Both Worlds is the apex mountain of Star Trek two-parters, so nothing's going to top that. I think the Worf story in Redemption is so well written and so powerful, and just the performance Michael Dorn puts in that is outstanding. With this, what's going to knock it down for me is a little bit only really getting Spock in the second episode. That's kind of a big thing.
Good point.
And I think there's still a few silly moments in this episode that just felt a little out of place, especially like the stuff with Riker and the whole nightclub thing. That kind of it makes it hard to take everything seriously that what's going down as because of it, because you just have these weird little side stories going on in this episode where when you look at Redemption and you look at Best of Both Worlds, their side stories still tie into the bigger picture. And it really kind of, I thought, took me a little bit more out of the episode than not. So for me, I'm going to say Unification Part 1 and 2, 8.5.
8.5. That's still a good rating right there, because, it was 8.2, 8.3 respectively for IMDb. So
I think it's place in Star Trek history and having Nimoy there.
Yeah,
I think you made some good points about Redemption. I actually enjoy Redemption a little bit more, and you're right. I felt Redemption had such a tight story around it, and not getting more Spock in the first one, is one of those factors as well. But the thing with Redemption, with the Klingon arc that we had there, was that there was also some cool action in it that didn't overshadow the whole story. So I thought that was a really good kind of balance there. This one, there's like a lot of drama, very little action, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I would have liked a little bit more, like you were knocking this episode, Kyle, because, how did they escape? It would have been nice if there was like a little running gun and a little more cowboy-ish stuff going on other than just cowboy diplomacy. I would say, but the drama is still really good and the story's still really good. So I'm going to go, you give yours, Kyle, 8.5, Amy, you're at 9.1. I'm going to kind of meet somewhere in the middle there. I'm going to give Unification 1 and 2 an 8.8. That's what I'm going
Okay.
to do. Yeah, so there you go. Okay, guys. So as I mentioned, this is, of course, the third episode of our two-part episode review of all of the Star Trek TNG episodes. And we're going to tease the next one, guys. This is going to be a fun one here. Next episode is Next Generation's Time's Arrow, Part 1 and 2. Going to be diving into a little bit of time travel. Very data heavy, of course, for obvious reasons. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But
Kevin, time travel, isn't that something happening here at the Fandom Podcast Network?
Yes, we are celebrating time travel this year on was it Culture Clash, right, Kyle?
Kind of all over the network. A little Couch Potato Theater, a little Culture Clash, and now a little Union Fed.
There you go. Yeah, it's a fun theme. We love time travel, and I have some fun thoughts about this. But let's go ahead and wrap this up, guys. This is a Fandom Podcast Network here. Kyle, let us know how we can find you.
Of course, you can find me on all the great shows of the Fandom Podcast Network, also all over the Fandom Podcast Network social media, whether it's on Twitter at FanPod Network or on Facebook with any of our Facebook groups, especially our main page, the Fandom Podcast Network. You can find me personally on social media on Twitter at AKyleW. You can also find me on Discord at AKyleW. And then you can find me on Instagram and Threads at AKyleFandom.
Awesome. Amy, where can we find you? BQing, obviously, but where else?
Yeah, so they're on Discord, Amy Nelson 522. But you can hear me over on BQN, where I'm co-hosting All Good Things, and we are going to be starting our YouTube channel, The View Screen, on September 8th. So join us Sunday morning and get your Star Trek talk show.
Awesome, that's awesome. I love what you guys are doing over there. My name is Kevin Reitzel. You can find me on Facebook and on all of the socials at Spartan_Phoenix. Of course, that includes X, Instagram, Threads, Discord, and Letterboxd. Please join our our Union Federation podcast Facebook group. We'd appreciate that. You can also follow us on X on Union Fed Podcast, Instagram at Union Federation Podcast, and visit fpnet.podbean.com for all our master feed for all of our podcasts on the Fandom Podcast Network. I'd like to thank Kyle, our security and weapons officer, and my co-captain. Kyle, as always, thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure. But next time, please don't expect me to dress appropriately for the holodeck time travel.
Yeah, that underboob outfit does not flatter you at all.
No, not in the slightest.
Amy, our first officer and counselor, thank you again, as always. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Julon True.
Julon True. There you go. Okay, guys, there we go. Live long and prosper. We are, without a doubt, the weirdest ship in the fleet. Until next week, guys.